Good evening. I'm Christine Favila with Riververse Project co-coordinator with the Illinois chapter of the Sierra Club. I am pleased to welcome everybody tonight to the first Friends of Tree Equity webinar, Uprooting Injustice by Planting Trees. We have a very full evening ahead of us, and I want to give you an idea of what our background is and why we're all pulled together, since there are a lot of different folks that are in the room, not only presenting tonight or on the Tree Equity Committee, but also in the audience. We are encouraged by your participation. This webinar is being sponsored by Friends of Tree Equity Illinois. Across the country, there are dramatic differences in the tree canopy that follow racial and economic disparities in our communities. Our goal is to provide the tools, resources, and encouragement needed to address these inequities, while also mitigating some of the worst effects of our warming climate. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was signed by President Biden 1.5 years ago, is the largest climate investment in U.S. history, designed to mobilize privatized capital to achieve our climate goals and strengthen long-term growth. Through the IRA, funding has gone to the United States Forest Service and has been distributed to some wonderful groups that are recipients of this funding. In turn, they will distribute that money through grants. We're excited tonight to pull everybody together to hear how residents, communities, municipalities, different government entities, organizations, state parks, and others can take advantage of this funding to boost the nation's tree cover in urban, suburban, and rural communities alike. Tonight, we're going to hear from 3 different organizations that work on these important tree resources. The Morton Arboretum's Chicago Region Tree Initiatives community manager, Zach works to ensure urban forests are healthier, more diverse, and more equitable by 2050. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act funding, the Chicago Region Tree Initiative will broaden its reach outside of Chicago to reach disadvantaged communities in downstate Illinois. Emily Ely, the program manager for Trees Forever, will discuss how Trees Forever can fund municipalities' projects with their Restore, Replant, Recover program, or through this new Inflation Reduction Act funding. They have long partnered with community volunteers, civic leaders, government officials, and landowners to design tree planting projects that meet local needs. Towards the end of the webinar, we'll hear from Wade Halva, Southern Illinois Outreach Coordinator with Faith in Place. Faith in Place has received funding from the U.S. Forest Service to help eligible disadvantaged communities across Illinois plant trees. Disadvantaged communities need trees the most, as trees help filter airborne pollutants, keep urban neighborhoods cooler, and shield against the worst effects of climate change. Wade will share information about how houses of worship, faith-based organizations, and community members across the state can take advantage of these funds. I'm super happy to introduce our first speaker of the evening, Jenny Wykowski, who's with the Kaskaskia Sierra Club Group and sits on the Tree Equity Coalition board. She's going to provide information about the benefit of trees. After that, we'll move into our 3 panelists, and then we'll have a question and answer time frame. As you'll notice, the chat feature is disabled this evening. However, the question and answer feature is available. We will take all of the questions and answers at the very end of the presentations, but please put your questions into the Q&A feature throughout the evening. Sally Burgess with the Illinois Sierra Club and Laura Davis with the Illinois League of Women Voters will be keeping track of all the different questions throughout the evening. They'll be pointing them towards the correct speakers who may be able to answer. And sometimes they might just throw them out to all the panelists. I'm excited to see what we can learn as we talk about the benefits of trees, how faith is holding us all together, how the IRA, through these 3 amazing organizations, is going to uphold us with some funding to get into our communities and dig into all of that work. I appreciate everyone's attendance. Jenny, if you wouldn't mind taking it from here.
Good evening, everyone. I am going to take some time to highlight the benefits of trees in urbanized areas. The importance of trees and tree canopy cannot be overstated. It is becoming more and more obvious as the climate changes threaten. A quick internet search shows that the issue is trending all across the globe. Tonight, I want to spotlight just some of the benefits of increasing our urban forestry. As you can see by this slide, most of the negative impacts of tree loss and lack of tree canopy falls on underserved communities of color and in poverty areas. This disparity is a major factor in health and social impacts that greatly affect the economics of not only the people who live in those communities, but also the budgets of the local, state, and federal governments. If we're going to decrease that economic impact, then we must value and increase our tree canopy because it decreases those negative findings. Communities without adequate tree cover will be more affected by climate change. But rising global temperatures with predicted longer, hotter heat waves, combined with the urban heat islands, will disproportionately affect children, seniors, low-income communities, and people of color. Trees, green roofs, and vegetation can help reduce urban heat island effects by shading buildings, deflecting radiation from the sun, and releasing moisture into the atmosphere. The tree absorbs carbon dioxide at a rate of 48 pounds per year. And according to Dan Burden in a 2004 article from the University of California, a street tree can return over $90,000 of direct benefits in the lifetime of the tree. So even when it's weighed against the cost of planning and maintenance, trees make good sense as investments, both for individuals and communities. And the economic footprint of urban forestry is like the rings in a pond. Not only is there direct value of business sales or agency spending, but there's also a multiplier effect that widely spreads those economic benefits. Notice that this particular chart is divided into employee compensation and number of jobs. Compensation directly to employees in these specific industries listed here is almost $16 billion. Indirect employment compensation is almost $9 billion, and that brings total job compensation to $25 billion. That is a healthy number for the economy. On the job portion of the chart, note that there are almost 323,000 direct jobs and another nearly 152,000 adjacent jobs that are benefited by the fact that the direct workers have that employment. And this makes a total number of jobs that approach 500,000 jobs. Yard trees in good condition could add 10 to 20% to the resale value of your home. In one study, 83% of realtors believe that mature trees have a, quote, strong or moderate impact on the saleability of homes. And you will find some slightly different numbers and percentages in different studies and in different parts of the country. But the message in all of them is consistent. Trees improve your home's appeal, its value, and its saleability. Another economic benefit is cost savings to the maintenance and replacement of pavements and asphalt services. You can see in the illustration that it can reduce those costs by as much as 58% over a 30-year period. Reducing energy demand means reduced need for power plants, which results in less air pollution. Even just one tree in the right place can reduce air conditioning costs up to 50%. The contribution of trees for winter warmth is often not as appreciated as the shade of summer, but the effect can be just as dramatic. By slowing the winter winds, trees lower the loss of heat in buildings by reducing cold air filtration. The trees reduce the drying effect on landscape plants. They reduce the abrasive effects of airborne particles, cut down on dust and dirt entering the building. The annual per home savings of 3 to 4% can translate to a national savings of $1.6 billion a year in the single family home sector of that economy. Trees also help reduce flooding. They slow down the flow of rainwater. They absorb rainwater. They reduce erosion. They create a path with their roots for the rainwater to extend out into the soil. In urban and suburban settings, a single deciduous tree can intercept from 500 to 760 gallons of rainwater per year. A USDA Forest Service study found that trees removed about 1/3 of the fossil fuel emissions each year from 1990 to 2007, which were the years covered by that study. And let's look for a minute at the health and wellness and equity for community and people. According to the EPA, trees and vegetation act as invaluable natural buffers, playing a crucial role in improving air quality, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, and enriching the environment while enhancing public health. By increasing tree coverage in congested urban areas, we significantly reduce the impact of harmful pollutants. People who live in greener areas are physically more active and have less disease. Safe, accessible green space in urban areas can reduce stress, violent crime, and gun violence, leading to safer communities. Poorly maintained and badly designed green space has the opposite effect and can encourage the spread of crime. Several studies support these hypotheses that well-designed and maintained urban parks can reduce gun violence, improve safety, and keep residents healthier. Similar reductions are reported for domestic violence in some of these studies, in the ones that address that. There was a 2021 study by Michigan State University that found the greener the city is, the fewer homicides were recorded over a 30-year period. And that was data from 290 American cities between 1986 and 2015. And in 2020, research by the University of Virginia found that appropriately designed and maintained green space has that potential to reduce violent crime and gun violence. There are many other studies that I have not cited here, some of which include the domestic violence statistic that I told you. So we need this. There are so many benefits of our tree wealth that we have overlooked for decades. It is past time to recognize and value these resources. Thank you for your time. I'm going to turn the program over to Zach, who's going to talk about how you can get some help to do that.
Thank you so much for that, Ginny. And thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I'm just going to pull up my slides quickly. As you heard, there's a lot of really great reasons to invest in trees. And I have the pleasure tonight of speaking a little bit about the latest and largest investment, the Inflation Reduction Act, and then some of the grant programs that are going to be coming out of that. So my name, as you heard, is Zach Wirtz. I'm the community manager of the Chicago Region Trees Initiative at the Morton Arboretum. And you may be wondering why someone from the Chicago area is talking at a meeting like this. The CRTI Chicago Region Trees Initiative is the Morton Arboretum's urban and community forestry program. and we work to impact people's lives by improving the health, diversity, and equitable distribution of trees in Chicago and throughout Illinois. So while Chicago is kind of our main focus area, we do work statewide, especially through our grant programs, including the one that I have the pleasure of talking about tonight. So to start us off, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what you heard earlier, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. I'm going to get a little bit of an introduction of some of the issues that this program is attempting to solve, and some of the dollars that are coming to the state of Illinois that we're also very excited about. So as you heard from Ginny, there's a lot of really important reasons why we need to be adding and maintaining canopy in our communities. As we look towards the future, we're seeing more and more issues with storms, with heat, with flooding issues that you heard about just a moment ago. And trees are a viable way, one of the ways that we can deal with some of those issues and help to mitigate them from becoming worse in the future. But it's important that we're also thinking about the issues that have happened in the past that trees can help us to fix. So there are a lot of historical inequities, especially in cities, due to things like redlining and inequitable distribution of canopy that are exacerbating these issues. So some of our most in need communities for the benefits of trees are the ones that have the least access to them. So it's important that as we think about money coming in for urban forestry, that we're prioritizing these places that need the benefits of trees the most. And so that brings us to the Inflation Reduction Act. The IRA is a huge spending package that was passed by Congress. And as you heard earlier, there is a large chunk of that that went to the USDA Forest Service that is specifically for urban forestry. A historic $1.5 billion in funding came into the Forest Service to be put into urban and community forestry projects across the United States. And Illinois is one of the states that received funding for that. We're very excited about it. And throughout the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a large focus on this idea of disadvantaged communities, which we're going to dig into in just a minute to talk about what is a disadvantaged community. The Inflation Reduction Act is following the White House's Justice 40 initiative. So at least 40% of all of the funding has to go to disadvantaged communities. And so there are kind of institutional steps along the way that make sure that at least a large portion of this funding is hitting those communities that Ginny mentioned that really need the benefits the most. And one thing we're extremely excited about with a lot of this funding is that because these grants are for disadvantaged communities, there is the ability for grants that don't require match spending. So you can think about match normally in a grant program as splitting the bill. So if you have a program that costs $50,000, a lot of times what communities will do is they'll ask for $25,000 and then they'll put $25,000 of their own dollars in, or they'll match it with their labor or time or volunteer work. It's really common among federal and state grants that match is required. However, with a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act funding coming down, because they are for those specific communities, much of the match requirement is waived. Not all of it. There are some programs that did agree to do some match, but I believe all three programs we're going to hear about today are all for those disadvantaged communities and will not require match, which is something that is unique. It's really exciting, and it reduces barriers for those communities that can't necessarily foot that bill, but really need the dollars to get urban forestry programs up and running or continued in their communities. So just to put a little bit of context around this, I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because the text I know is very small. I have sent some slides out to the group and you'll receive them afterwards so you can come back and take a look at this. But what I want to point out here is that both the state of Illinois as well as a number of non-governmental organizations receive this IRA funding. And so there's a number of different pathways that you may see IRA funding coming into communities like yours. On the government side, there are a handful of cities and villages that received funding directly from the Forest Service. They're listed here. The Forest Service has a really great website where you can see everyone that's been awarded funding and what their projects look like. But in addition, our state, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, received over $13 million in funding. The Morton Arboretum and Trees Forever are helping to distribute some of that funding. So you're going to hear from Emily after me to talk a little bit more about some of the available dollars through Trees Forever as well. And then there's also non-governmental funding that's coming into the state. So groups like the Urban Growers Collective, Faith in Place, who you're going to hear from today as well, and the Morton Arboretum receive direct funding from the Forest Service to do projects. So what are we considering a disadvantaged community? This is a really important question, right? Because a lot of this funding is earmarked for those communities. So much of the pass-through funding from the IRA is for disadvantaged communities defined by a number of federal tools. And I'm going to make an important note here that not every grant program that's using IRA funding is using the exact same tools. And so make sure as you're thinking about potentially applying for funding or encouraging your communities to apply for them, that you're looking at the program and looking at the correct tools that they're using. So three of the common ones that are being used are the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, the EPA's Environmental Justice Screening Tool, and the HUD Opportunity Zones. I'm going to go over what each of those is in brief here in just 1 second. And it's important to note that the Forest Service is asking us to track the work at the level that is classified as disadvantaged. So in most cases, that's at the census tract level. So rather than looking at like a whole city, you're looking at individual census tracts or larger neighborhood groups for that determination. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive too far into what each of these tools does, but there are these three tools, starting with the CJUST, the Climate Economic Justice Screening Tool, that looks at a myriad of different components and dictates whether or not a census tract is considered disadvantaged or not. There are the HUD opportunity zones. This one doesn't come with a flashy map. Unfortunately, it's just a list of census tracts. But these are census tracts that are identified by the governor that are kind of primed for more opportunity in terms of economic development. And then we also see the EPA looking at other thresholds, including particulate matter, ozone, other kind of environmental stressors that are having a disproportionate impact in some communities. So the Morton Arboretum and Trees Forever, along with the state of Illinois, decided that it's kind of a lot of different things for people to consider. So we put together a one-stop shop for much of the IRA eligibility. I won't say all because I know some programs are only using one of those three tools. So we call this the Municipal IRA Screening Tool, or MIRA. And it was designed for folks to be able to go in, look at their municipality or look for public land in their area and figure out, are they in census tracts that are considered disadvantaged, so that folks can start to think about where they can do things like tree planting and maintenance, and where they can bring the most kind of beneficial impact to these disadvantaged communities. So we see here an example from Northern Illinois and Rockford. You can see, I hope you can see my cursor here. But the city itself is outlined in this kind of light blue, and we can see where there are overlaps in the green census tracts with the municipality in kind of the dark blue color. So Rockford has about 71% of their land area is considered disadvantaged, and those are the areas that they could target with these IRA funds through a lot of the grant programs. In addition to looking at cities, we can also use the tool to look at public parks and forest preserves as well. So it's not just for municipalities, even though that's what the name implies. So because I don't have an hour to go through all of this, I want to share the link to the map so folks can go out and check it out. So the MIRA tool is a list of municipalities, kind of more in a spreadsheet format. And then there's this interactive map that you can also check out. So I'd encourage you all to take a look at that after the presentation tonight. So from the Morton Arboretum, coming soon, we have actually been fortunate to launch our first IRA funded grant program, and our application period has closed, but we have a second program coming out later this spring. We have grants that are going to be available for entities like community-based organizations, homeowners associations, local governments, public and state universities, and libraries to do urban forestry projects. The dollars, again, are specifically for those disadvantaged areas. I expect that we'll be able to kind of share more details about what that looks like in a request for proposals in late spring of this year. And for our grant program, we're proposing, and we're still working with the Forest Service to kind of nail down everything, but these will hopefully be 3-year grants, and they'll be $25,000 and above. So you may be asking, okay, there's all this money, what kind of projects can we do with that? Our grant program has 3 kind of main project areas that you can apply for funding for. And there's a lot of information on the screen. Again, I'm going to kind of gloss over it. You're welcome to come back and read that in detail later. But it's things like increasing tree canopy in disadvantaged areas, improving forest health in those disadvantaged areas. So making sure we're mitigating risks from trees, making sure that they're healthy, and protecting them from future threats. And then also improving urban forestry, urban and community forestry programs in general. So there's dollars for staff funding. There's dollars to do inventories of trees that are already in your city, so you can think about how to properly and most effectively manage them going forward. So if you're interested in all of that and want to hear more, you can sign up for the CRTI newsletter. Our newsletter goes out monthly, and this QR code will be available for you afterwards as well. And we also have a grant hub that we post all of our grants at the Morton Arboretum and CRTI, as well as other grants from partner organizations and things that we see that our communities can benefit from. So please feel free to visit chicagorti.org/grants for more information and to keep a lookout for upcoming opportunities. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. I will note that if you have questions after this presentation, please feel free to reach out to us via email. But I am going to pass things over now to Emily to talk about the next program.
Thank you so much, Zach. All right. My name is Emily Ailey. I am the Southern Illinois Field Coordinator and Program Manager for Illinois for an organization called Trees Forever. We're a nonprofit urban forestry focused organization in Illinois, Iowa, and a little bit of work in Wisconsin as well. So you can see our mission here: plant and care for trees and the environment by empowering people, building community, and promoting stewardship. Tree equity and this work with the Inflation Reduction Act is a natural fit here for Trees Forever. A little bit more about our organization. We're very, very volunteer focused. We work closely with thousands of volunteers every year. Here in Illinois, we are working across the state. We are focused primarily on downstate communities. We don't really work in the Chicago area, but we work in smaller communities across the rest of the state. So we do a number of things for communities. We assist with development of tree ordinances and tree boards. We work with volunteers. We help communities achieve Tree City USA status. And we also do education and outreach such as this. So this was touched on a bit, quite a bit by Virginia earlier, but just a little bit about what tree equity is. This is a concept of having enough trees in a space, in a community, so that everyone is experiencing those benefits. American Forests created something called the Tree Equity Score, which is basically a tool which allows you to go in, put in a community and find a specific number, a score, which is will show how high the level of tree equity is in that community. So here we're looking at Springfield, Illinois. And you can see it's sort of a patchwork here, but certain of those neighborhoods only have about 14% canopy, and that's making it a higher priority. So this is that concept of tree equity that was really coming into play and informing the Inflation Reduction Act and these planting projects. As Zach was speaking to earlier, there's a major focus within the Inflation Reduction Act on tree equity, on getting increased tree cover into areas that have historically lacked it because of racism, because of redlining, because of divestment, and a number of different issues. And so Trees Forever is one of the communities that is receiving this IRA funding through the state, through Illinois DNR. We're working very closely with CRTI and with ZAC. We have somewhat similar programming with some differences as well, and we're in communication very closely. So the great thing is, if you reach out to me and it makes more sense for you to work with CRTI, I can get you in contact with Zach and vice versa. So we're all in very close communication and collaboration here. So Trees Forever, we also have funding, instead of being sort of in one package, as CRTI's is, our grants are broken up into separate grants for plantings, for inventories and management plans, and for tree removal. The planting grant, our first round of that planting grant just closed. We will be having another one next spring. That grant is up to $15,000. Another thing to note is that we are also using CRTI's Mira tool for eligibility. So to make things simple, if you know that you are eligible with that tool for CRTI, you're also eligible for ours as well. It's the same one. And if you have any issues or any confusion, we do have resources on our website. We have videos walking through it. And of course, we're always available to talk you through it as well. Okay. We also have those grants for inventories and management plans as well. And that will be something where you are going to work with like a tree service who are doing that work professionally, but we are helping the community get that funding for it. And then there's the removal grants as well, up to $25,000, again, to hire a contractor who will be doing the removals of those trees. And it's the same eligibility requirements with the added note on this removal that a community must have achieved Tree City USA in order to get it. So neither the management plan grant nor the removal grant are live and active yet. But if you would like to stay updated on that, you can go to this website, treesforever.org/ICC, which has everything you need to know about our Illinois Community Canopy program, which is our IRA-funded grant programs. Through that, you can get the information. It's updated regularly, and you can also sign up to receive notifications when grants open up. So as I mentioned, Tree City USA certification is a requirement for those removal grants. It is also a best practice in urban forestry management, and it's something that we work with consistently, even independent of this IRA funding. So those requirements to become a Tree City USA are these 4 things you see here: having a tree board, an ordinance, $2 per capita, and recognizing Arbor Day. So a big part of what we do is supporting communities in achieving this. Some already have, some have all of these things already and just haven't quite documented it. So that's a process that we can assist communities in working through. Additionally, we are able to provide education and outreach to communities about their tree care as well. So we can do everything I just mentioned. We're also available for workshops, for classes, for webinars, for presentations. If you are a community member, such as a volunteer, and you are having trouble getting your city government on board with this, work that we can do as well as come and give a presentation to the city government. Teach them about some of those things that Jenny was talking about earlier, such as the benefits of trees to a municipality, talking about the financing of this program, how it works, all of the ins and outs, to make the government a little more comfortable with that tree care. So we have these opportunities going through 2028. As I said, we just closed our first round of the planting grant, but we will later this year be coming out with the management plan and removal grants. And the idea is that communities will continue to move through these if they are interested and able to do so. In addition to, just a note, in addition to this IRA funded programming we also have something called our Recover, Replant, Restore grant. And that is funded through Illinois DNR as well. We work very closely with them. And that is funding. It does not have those disadvantaged community eligibility requirements, and therefore it does have the match that Zach was mentioning earlier. So it does require a match. But that is tree funding that is available. So if a community is not eligible for this IRA funded grants, or sometimes part of a community will be eligible and part will not because of the way those tracks break down. This is something that is available to all of our Illinois communities as well. This information is also available on our website. And of course, you can reach out to me for more information as well. As I said, offered every spring and fall. The spring round of applications has closed, but the fall round will be open in August for that Recover, Replant, Restore grant. So those are a couple of different opportunities we have for funding tree plantings and tree care throughout Illinois. And now I will be passing it on to Wade Halva from Faith in Place to wrap us up.
Good evening. We are going to ask you, if you have questions, to please use the question and answer feature in the webinar. And that way we'll have those recorded for later and we can address those if we need to later. Faith in Place has also received funding through the Inflation Reduction Act for urban and community forestry. You can read about that and check out, put yourself on our email list for when our RFP comes out, following the link on the screen or the QR code. With that grant, Faith in Place will re-grant $1.6 million over 5 years for tree equity and workforce and forestry workforce projects across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Because we're going across Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, we're not going to use the MIRA tool because that's an Illinois central tool. We'll be using the climate and economic justice screening tool to allow those projects to be developed and implemented by community-based organizations and other partners, including houses of worship and faith-based organizations located in and serving those disadvantaged communities. Through 65 to 85 projects that focus on historically marginalized communities disproportionately impacted by climate change, these workforce projects will provide support to areas municipal partners may overlook. Our mission in general is to empower people of diverse faiths and spiritualities to be leaders in advancing environmental and racial justice, providing resources to educate, connect, and advocate for healthier communities. We partner with communities of faith from diverse religious traditions, as well as people who identify as spiritual or motivated by justice, but don't identify with a specific faith tradition. Now, many faith communities have tenets of the faith that speak about the beauty of the natural world or use images of planting and harvest to pass along spiritual truths. In my tradition, we talk about trees planted by the water that flourish, seeds that are scattered and how they grow, sheep and goats, lambs and lions, vines and branches, and many others. Sacred stories also contain stories of creation, of drought and famine, promises measured in the stars of the sky or sands of the sea, of destruction by water of wind, and of messages carried by water, wind, and earth. So these tree equity and workforce projects are motivated both by environmental justice and spiritual imperative. Beyond those images, most faith traditions also provide direction for how we care for one another. How we care for one another includes how we care for the environment in which our neighbors live, move, and have their being. How well we care for soil, water, and air is a direct witness to how well we care for one another. Hebrew scripture reminds the people that to remember they were strangers in the land and how they treat people, and to love neighbor as self. Jesus repeats that, and it ends up being known as the greatest commandment. And then we have similar directives given in Islam. Not one of you truly believes until you wish for others what you wish for yourself. In Hinduism, this is the sum of duty: do not unto others that what you would not have them do unto you. And in Taoism, regard your neighbor's gain as your own gain, and your neighbor's loss as your own loss. And houses of worship occupy unique places in their communities. Often they're the longest tenured occupant of the community. They serve across generations, make space for community, host significant life markers, celebrating births, marriages, and deaths. Houses of worship and faith communities host blood drives and vaccination events, counseling services, soup kitchens, food pantries, housing shelters, cooling and warming centers, quiet spaces, and more, and serve as the places people often turn to in times of need, physical, spiritual, and emotional. Occupying that space in a community also gives houses of worship a chance to demonstrate how the space outside their building can benefit their communities. Gardens, vegetable, pollinator, or sensory, little free libraries, little free pantries, or trees. This public witness demonstrates the faith of the community and invites the community to experience the benefits. Often a faith community gathered can make the investment or take the risk that individuals may not be able to make, providing a template and an incentive to be followed with a solar install, a community garden, a food forest, or a daycare. And here you see some pictures of a planting actually done with a Trees Forever grant on the left in Murfreesboro, and some more tree planting from Faith in Place on the right. And then community garden work at houses of worship and in the community, and the fruits of those labors. Not least of all, faith communities are aspirational communities that constantly strive towards creating a more just and equitable world, starting with their own immediate communities. Addressing the inequities of present-day life in a variety of ways: food, education, healthcare, including mental health care, shelter, and recovery. Faith communities can also address the inequities of environment by providing green space, trees to refresh the air and provide shade and cooling, to anchor the soil, to repair the damages done in the past, and to provide a pathway into a new, healthier, more just, and equitable community. The connection between faith communities and trees is made explicit by our CEO, the Reverend Brian Souter. Our faith partners are like healthy trees, standing tall and strong in their communities. Their roots are deep, their trunks wide and strong to withstand the greatest of gales. Their branches reach out, and their towering presence provides home, shade, shelter, and nourishment for all who come near. Houses of worship are often thought to be meddling with some of these things, but this is what we do best. It's provide for the community around us. And in this way, Faith in Place is really excited to be re-granting these funds over the next several years. Thank you. Christine?
Thank you, Wade. I know that we have some questions that have come up from listening to these three dynamic presenters. And I would like to pass the torch over to Sally Burgess and Laura Davis in answering some of those. I know a lot of them have been answered online already, but there are probably many more that would like to chime in now. So I will pass it over to Sally.
Thank you, Christine. Our first question, and we're actually going to ask Nancy if she would be willing to come off mute and ask her question in person. Nancy Maxwell, would you be willing to do that for us?
I can probably guess at what Nancy's question is because I work with her on a regular basis. She represents Carbondale United, which is an anti-gun violence and violence interrupter organization in Carbondale. And my hunch is that she's wondering if there's a possibility to apply for some of these grant funds in such a way that they can not only add to the community, but be used to memorialize loved ones as well. That would probably work in the faith and place context, but I'd certainly ask Emily and Zach to chime in on that as well.
Yes, absolutely. There's no reason why our grants couldn't be used for memorial trees. Our tree planting grant, it does need to be planted on public property. So they would need to be in a park or around a building such as a city hall or a school or something like that. But as long as that location is there and the other requirements are in place, you could absolutely include something like a ceremony with a family or a plaque or anything like that as a way of memorializing lost loved ones as well.
That was exactly my thought when I seen the webinar about the trees. Sometimes memorials get put up. Sometimes they're not that great, but what could be greater than having a beautiful tree and having a ceremony? And maybe, I don't know if we could put a little plaque or something by the tree or something on the stand. That was exactly my thought.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nancy. I think Laura has the next question.
Yes, all right. This is directed to Emily. Did you say that the Trees Forever Canopy project grants will last through 2028?
That's correct.
Then another one, a little bit of a follow-up. What if a community has an infestation of moles and groundhogs tearing up yards and foundations of homes? Any advice?
Zach, do you know anything about mole and groundhog infestations?
No, unfortunately, I don't. To my knowledge, not a common pest of trees, so I can't unfortunately comment too much on that.
Okay, our next question. Does IRA funding for all three groups work for both private and public land?
So I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but for the Trees for Everyone Forever grant, it is only for public land.
With our funding, it is traditionally only been for public land. We are looking into the potential of opportunities on private land, but it's not something that we have been able to come to a final agreement with. So unfortunately today I can't say yes to that question, but we are definitely looking at opportunities for getting trees onto private properties as well. We recognize that there are a lot of communities where there maybe isn't room to plant a tree on public property where it could still benefit the wider public. And some opportunities exist in basically being able to get those trees into the hands of residents who can also and are willing to take care of them. So more information to come. I am somewhat hopeful that we'll be able to do that in the future, but right now, unfortunately, I can't say a solid yes for sure.
And that's where we kind of get to shine, because ours will be targeting faith communities and community-based organizations. Often those spaces are considered to be public, but not in the explicit ownership of the land and the property. And so for community groups, houses of worship, faith communities, we may be one of the better places to go to. But as Zach has mentioned, pay attention, read your email, sign up for the mailing lists. Things may be coming out.
Okay. Sally, okay. There's a question regarding locations. Have they been identified for the grants to date to begin planting? Can any of you speak to that?
I can take a first shot at that. So we just finished our application period for our first IRA funded grant. So we know at least where folks are interested in doing those projects. They're still going through application review and award processes. So it'll be a couple of months before the first kind of batch of IDNR supported IRA funding comes out. But we do, similar to Trees Forever, have annual grant projects. We've been doing plantings across the state for years between our three organizations. So obviously, this idea of disadvantaged communities and needing trees in them is not something new. And I think all three of our organizations can say that we've been working on getting trees in the ground in the places where they need them the most for many years at this point.
Anyone else want to tackle that question, or should we move on? Okay. Are efforts being made to ensure genetic diversity and integrity of trees planted is sound? I lived on a street devoid of trees because only elms were there and DED took them all. Who wants to tackle that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a major part of our focus, both in our IRA funded planting grants and in our regularly happening planting grants. Our Recover, Plant, Restore planting grant is what we call it, the one we have twice a year. A major focus of that is on diversity. So if you submit an application to us, you do need to give us a proposed tree list of species, and we also help with the development of those. But if you submit a proposed tree list to Trees Forever and you say, I only want to plant sugar maples, we are going to come back to you and say this doesn't have the diversity that we need, and we'll help you pick out a number of different diverse species that will do well in the areas that you want to plant. Because as this questioner pointed out, that is a huge issue in our Illinois communities and across the country, of communities saying, okay, we like this one tree, we like this elm tree or this ash tree, we're only going to plant that, and then those are all being lost at once. So we focus on diversity and trees that are going to do really well in our areas, in the hopes that this canopy is going to be vibrant, not just now, but long term.
Okay, I have a question. Is there funding included in the IRA grants that will help with hiring interns or others from the EJ communities to help with the care of the trees post-planting, such as watering or anything else that makes sure they're established?
Go ahead, Wade.
I know that part of ours is definitely workforce related, workforce development related. That's going to look different in a bunch of the different communities, depending on how that plays out, what the community is like, what the projects are. But we do recognize that part of this is economic. Communities need to have the skills to maintain trees, and communities, if they're going to thrive long term, as Emily has highlighted, need to be maintained. And so training people to do that, not expecting the volunteers in the community to come out and do that, but also expecting folks to be well trained and to know what they're doing is part of this grant and this development. I think for all three of our grants on some levels, to be able to do some workforce development towards career-based professional forestry and funding that to happen. Zach?
Yeah, I'll just add, with all of the planting grants that the Arboretum facilitates, we do require the grantee to sign a maintenance agreement with us for 3 years. That basically says we're going to water that tree, we're going to make sure that it's mulched, we're going to make sure that it actually survives that establishment period. One of the great things about this IRA funding is that staffing can be a big part of the ask. And so hiring an intern or paying a contractor in your area to do that work is definitely something that we require you to do and encourage you to do. I think it's really great that you're considering, how can you bring in individuals from those communities and not just some sort of outside force to come in and work. So workforce development is definitely a fundable activity, as is personnel from your organization. So there's staff time there, so that an intern would definitely count towards that.
Terrific. Getting some really great questions tonight. I'm with Prairie State Conservation Coalition and wondering if there have been any conservation organizations, such as conservation land trusts or conservancies, that have become involved or partnered on this project.
Can jump in again. So our grants are open to, the first round that we did was only for government entities, but that included forest preserves and conservation districts. So we are definitely also considering not just, the kind of classic city street trees, but also our natural areas that so many people depend on for their access to green areas. And with our upcoming funding, that extends to nonprofit organizations. So groups like land trusts would be eligible to apply for future funding as well.
Anyone else want to contribute on that? No? Okay. So we have a question comment here from Robert Dutton. He's the Health Equity Manager at the Will County Health Department. They serve all the underserved communities in Will County. And he's asking about information fact sheets about the 3 grants so that we can educate the community partners about these opportunities.
We do have that, and I can certainly include that when I send my slides into you to be distributed.
Great. Is that true for Morton Arboretum and Faith in Place?
So I think Wade's probably going to give a similar answer, but we're still working on getting our request for proposals for the upcoming round of grants solidified. So I can encourage you to visit and sign up for the 2 Wade shared earlier, his interest list. I signed up for it while we were standing here. Super easy. You should definitely take a look at it if you want more information. And then similarly, check out CRTI's Grant Hub or our newsletter. But Wade, if you want to add anything else.
I think we've been moving at the speed of government on some of this, which may be the only thing slower than the speed of church. And so as those pieces all get nailed down and clarified, the best way for you to get all that information is to go to our various websites and sign up for that information. Emily and Zach have mentioned that they're going to be working closely together, and we'll be working closely together with them as well. So part of the reason we're doing this webinar in this way is to cross-pollinate as much as we can, so that if folks may not qualify for one, they know that there's other things out there and they know who to talk to and those sorts of things, because all of us want these monies to be spent as effectively as possible throughout the state of Illinois to make our community stronger. So we don't get to keep the money if we don't spend it. We really, really want to spend it. So sign up, look at grants that you think make sense for your organization and your community, and apply to them as they come up. But do be watching, because all the final details are not out yet for us.
Thanks, Wade. Emily, I think you have somewhat addressed this, but I'm going to ask the question from Annette Campbell. How often is maintenance for public planting trees? How often is maintenance for public planting trees? Who determines the proper trees for the area chosen?
Yeah, I can maybe clarify that a little bit more briefly and then leave space for Zach and Wade as well. But that is part of our application process. We require the community to have a maintenance plan for those trees, including things like watering, including things like mulching, pruning as necessary. We need to know who's going to do it, when it's going to be done, etc. And that said, myself and my colleague, Eric Notes, are the 2 Trees Forever field coordinators in Illinois, and we are very hands-on. So you can call us, you can email us, you can set up a meeting with us anytime, and we can walk you through best practices for that tree management, and we can also help with that tree species selection as well.
I'm going to jump in and handle a couple of the questions that are related to that are in the Q&A. Last year, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, we put 53 trees in the ground through a grant from Trees Forever in Murfreesboro, Illinois. How has it been a year? And as part of that process, Emily came down, she looked at the site we'd selected, she helped us navigate what trees would be best given the ground, given the space, all of those sorts of things. It's power lines, it's playground equipment, it's street access, it's all of these things that I don't think about on a regular basis, but Emily has to. It's her job. And so she really helped us put those pieces together. We do not currently have a plan for that again this year using those same funds in Murfreesboro. It really took us about 8 months to do the planning and make that project come to life. And with all of this IRA money, we wanted to get information out to more communities and see what communities really wanted to do in that regard. So can't say we're necessarily going to do something like that in Murfreesboro or Carbondale again this year. That's already planned. We'd love to invite you to come up with a plan for Murfreesboro, Carbondale, Southern Illinois to do some tree planting. And that also answers Nancy's question. The federally subsidized housing property is where we did it. It was Jackson County Housing Authority. So that's considered public ground. And so would meet the funding of potentially all 3 of our grants, I believe, at this point. So I think I just covered several of those, hopefully.
That's great. And somebody did comment that it's a great opportunity to build community in public housing. So thanks, Wade. Another question has to do with providing guidance for the application process and the requirements. Zach, you want to start with that one?
Sure. Yeah, so we have structured our entire grant program around being able to provide assistance to communities that are interested in applying. So our coordinators are able to assist communities with figuring out what kind of projects they might be interested in doing, helping them get their application materials together, even down to helping certain communities to write their applications if there's a great need. All of our applications are scored by third-party folks, so we have eliminated ourselves from the scoring committee so that we don't pose any sort of conflict of interest. So at the Arboretum, we're able to actually kind of sit down with you as much as needed and kind of go through your application materials, make sure you're on the right track. I know Emily also mentioned that kind of concept of figuring out what to plant and where and how, and we can also support those kind of activities. So assistance for communities, especially those that are considered disadvantaged, who may not have a grant writer on staff or may not have an arborist on staff, is something that we have definitely built into all of our grant activities.
Anyone have anything else to add, Emily or Wade? No? Okay. Laura Basanta asks, is funding available for removal of Bradford pears and replacing with native trees?
So our grant program will have funding available to remove invasive trees, and we do encourage replacement of those afterwards. And I have to double check if Bradford pear is on that list right now, but I believe it is.
All right. Question here regarding volcano mulching. Education to discourage volcano mulching. First of all, you're going to have to explain it.
Happy to explain volcano mulching. So that basically what volcano mulching is when mulch is piled up around the trunk of a tree. You see it a lot. And basically what's happening there is that is going to make that tree trunk damp. It might encourage pests to be close to there. It can cause rot. And it's not good for that bark. So that again, that's part of that work we do either on site on the day of. We can give demonstrations how to plant a tree, how to mulch a tree. But we can also do standalone workshops and presentations on mulching, on tree care, getting that information out there that when you're mulching a tree, you want to go thin and wide, you don't want to go high and deep. That's not good for the tree. And that's just one of many things that people don't necessarily know. They just think more is better. And so we're not just wanting to get trees in the ground, we're wanting to get trees in the ground in the right way so that they're going to do really well.
Terrific. We seem to be at the end. Well, maybe a new question has come in. How can you tell if a tree is sick before it starts to fall?
me try and take that one on. It's pretty broad. So there's a lot of things that can happen to trees that we may not necessarily see. My overarching recommendation is to, if you have any concerns about your trees, especially if it comes to something regarding safety, to contact a certified arborist. Those are the folks that are professional, credentialed by the International Society of Arboriculture, and you can find information on locating a certified arborist both on the International Society of Arboriculture's website and our local chapter, the Illinois Arborist Association. So I would send you in that direction first.
I guess I would have one more thing. Some questions came up regarding the slides in the presentation. And this is being recorded and it will be available. And some people were interested also in the research, and that too will be available. Thank you.
I want to thank all of the speakers that we had here this evening. And I really encourage everybody that's on this webinar tonight to continue that interaction, that communication, talk about these grant submissions. We are here to help you make those reality. And to be on the lookout for those slides and the recording within 1 week. We will have all the presentations ready for you. Those links will be available, and we hope that you take advantage of those. So once again, thank you so very much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.